Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. I got a couple things I wanted to say today about the JFK conference that I went to, and why is it important? Why did I go to this thing? Even today, when we look at our government today, you can tie it all back to what happened November 22nd, 1963. And you had powerful forces at work, and they all collided with each other on that day. Basically, one camp was very upset, and this camp was comprised of the CIA, the FBI, government, Congress, Senate, powers that be, very powerful politicians like Lyndon Baines Johnson. And they conspired. They conspired to get rid of their president, who was a major threat to them personally. And he was a very powerful president and very popular president. So that's what made it a bigger threat. And there was no way to slow down his popularity because he had what they didn't have. He had Camelot, he had pizzazz, he had a beautiful wife, he had sex appeal, he had charm, he had humor, he had good looks, and he had an independent mind. And these were things that the powers that be, the swamp at the time, was threatened by. And they were threatened by not only John F. Kennedy, but his brother was Robert F. Kennedy, who was the chief law enforcer, the Attorney General of the country at the time. And he was a threat to the Mafia, to the CIA, and to the FBI, Hoover. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover. It's funny, Hoover ended up running for president later on. I think he was vice president under Johnson. But that's a different Hoover for a different day. So what we got here is not only JFK for 8 years, you get RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, for 8 years, and then Ted Kennedy for another 8 years. You get 24 years of Kennedys. That's a clear and present danger, right? Like the movie. But to the powers that be, Lyndon Johnson, who hated Kennedy. Even Eisenhower recognized this. In one of the videos they have here, LBJ, loose ends. Ed Tatro mentions that Eisenhower hated Kennedy. Eisenhower hated. Johnson hated Kennedy. And the Kennedys, just if you read the book that got me going, it's Evelyn Lincoln's book, Kennedy and Johnson. I have it here somewhere. I know I do. Anyway, that's the book that got me going. It says what she basically wrote a book. She was the secretary to Kennedy, and after Kennedy was assassinated, she writes this book that basically says, without saying, that Johnson set up Kennedy. Now, Eisenhower wouldn't speak to Johnson when he accepted the nomination to become vice president. He accepted it. The Kennedys offered it because Johnson, you got to understand, he was the most powerful politician probably of the 20th century, and he, we can go into all the amazing things he was. He worked hard. He really did. He wanted to be president, obviously bad. He was, for him not to see this upstart become president was a slap in the face to him. And same thing to Nixon. It was a slap in the face to have this upstart senator become president. And again, they couldn't really compete with Kennedy, right? As far as his looks, his charm, his wit, his sense of humor, his background, his family. They couldn't really compete, so he was a major threat. The whole Kennedy family was a major threat. But getting back to Eisenhower would not even talk to Johnson the moment he accepted to be on the ticket, because he knew that Johnson hated Kennedy with a deep passion. And so he knew something was afoot. And that's what happened. So eventually, they waited to the end too, because Johnson was ready about to be bumped off the ticket in '64. So another 12, he was probably going to announce it in a couple of weeks. And so, from a political perspective, it had to happen soon. They had to get rid of Kennedy soon. And so that's to me, the political nuts and bolts behind it. You had Johnson, who stole the 1948 election with, the election for the Box 13 that had 72 out of 73 votes for him. And then in '54, he made a deal with the Christians, the churches, to be quiet, not talk about politics, so that he could get elected again, because, he had alienated, evidently, the Christian vote, which was huge in Texas. So, and then we had all these, obviously, economic interests that were in jeopardy. I heard, Johnson was about to be charged with some sort of inappropriate financial dealings, agriculture or whatever. I can't remember, but my basic point I want to make is that for those people, they were realizing their political careers were basically over with this Kennedy and his popularity. So that's the single number one reason why they all came together and got a perfect plan together, and then they were able to neutralize, it appears. I mean, if you read Ed Haslem's book, Dr. Mary's Monkeys, he throws this out there that Oswald was a Russian agent. It was a spy in Russia, and he was kind of stranded, and he had no way to get back. He had the family now, and he was worried about them living in Russia, so he wanted to come back, but he had no sponsor anymore, really, because of the shift of administrations. So he was left stranded. So perhaps somebody high in the State Department, had to be something very high, like Attorney General, maybe Harvey Kennedy. You know that Oswald's a spy, knows he has ties in New Orleans, and he could infiltrate the Mafia in New Orleans, which he grew up with, and also, the CIA and the FBI, which is something Kennedy wanted to clean up. So maybe there was a connection between Kennedy and Oswald that nobody's talking about. But when they pinned it all on Oswald, I'm talking Robert Kennedy, Attorney General, once they pinned it all on Oswald, that neutralized Robert Kennedy from saying, hey, this was my spy, he was working for me. Because then they, Hoover and Johnson could say, hey, what did you just do? You just had somebody kill one of your men, kill your own brother. What kind of power trip are you on? So my message today is that the number one threat to the powers that be was the Kennedy family. And that's why they had to nip it in the bud. And that's what happened. Now you have a whole plethora of economic interests, political interests, financial interests. You know, the Mafia was mad at the Kennedys. You know, it appears that the Mafia was chosen as to be, and you know, I think the CIA and the FBI kind of set up the Mafia because there was appears to be an abort mission. And Roselli was, you know, a Mafia guy, but he was a CIA. He was CIA too, so he was like the go-between, the liaison. And he flew into Dallas to abort the mission, but they knew that the Mafia only takes orders from who? Their own people, so a higher authority than Johnny Roselli. And it was still a go, but then the CIA probably knew that, right? So they can turn around and say, hey, it wasn't us. It was the Mafia if it came down to it. Because the Mafia is the one that basically pulled the trigger. If you look at James Files' videos, there's a tremendous amount of testimony there. I mean, I do have a couple problems. And when you hear somebody's testimony 20 years later, there's going to be problems. But, you know, but it makes more sense to me the more I think of it, because then the FBI and the CIA could just say, hey, we're out of this, right? And the Mafia can take the blame for this. And but that's how I see what happened. As it turns out, nobody really knows because they did such a good job of blaming Oswald. And then the Warren Commission just completely covered everything up. We won't get into that, but there's so much out there that disputes the single bullet theory, which was Specter's brainstorm. But Dr. Surratt, you know, tears that apart. He was the number one autopsy doctor in America, pathologist. He testified before Congress. He's still alive too. So we have a government that has been born almost from this insanity that took place, and everybody who won has become the new swamp, and that's why we have such a problem today. The CIA and our tax dollars, a huge chunk of it goes to the military, and the military is really controlled by the CIA, in my opinion. So, you know, that's why your tax dollars are so high. And one of the many reasons, but that's a good chunk of it, you know. So that's my message today: is the JFK assassination is something that, you know, they mock people who say conspiracy theory. In fact, the word was coined back in the 60s, and it was a slander from the CIA back towards anybody who doesn't believe the Warren Commission. Lee Oswald is really an innocent man. He actually knew, you know, if you read Judy Baker's testimony, who has become a witness here in the last 10, 15 years. And she had conversations with Lee, and Lee knew as early as, I think it was July 29th or August 29th, that he was being set up. And Judy had a conversation with him 48 hours within the time when, you know, he was of the assassination. And Lee knew very well. See, Lee was CIA and he was Mafia, and he was playing both sides of the fence according to the need. In fact, I got a little video here that It's a musical put out by Jason Trachtenberg, starring Jason and Emily Finberg. Hope I pronounced it right. Me and Lee, based on the great book by Judy Baker. That's the book right there. I recommend that book, and the DVD. So that's just my message today. Is just there's been a tremendous injustice done to all of us as a result of the Kennedy assassination, and one man Lee is a byword now. Everybody, when you say the word Lee Harvey Oswald, I mean, he was killed 2 days after it all happened by Jack Ruby, who Sparky. I mean, if you read Me and Lee, there's a whole chapter on Sparky in New Orleans and how Lee associated with Sparky, or Jack Ruby, that was his name, knew Lee for a long time. That's a great reason alone to get the book Me and Lee by Judy Baker. Just to read that chapter, because I get more information on Jack Ruby. And Ruby was the guy who silenced Lee, and Lee never had a fair trial, but as a result of silencing them, that was part of the plan, and they could just blame it all on him. And the Warren Commission, how many hoops did they have to go through just to I mean, it defies physics what they came up with Specter's single bullet theory. And I think most people, I think it's 70% of the people, believe that it was a conspiracy. And Mafia, CIA, FBI, and the government, vice president, lured him to Texas for some party for some congressman who Kennedy liked, actually. And then Watergate, Nixon lost money. You read again this video, Ed Tatro, great researcher, great guy too. LBJ, Incriminating Loose Ends by Ed Tatro. He talks about how Nixon was benefiting financially, but Kennedy kind of clamped down on it. So he was angry. He was angry at Kennedy for a lot of reasons, but after, Nixon thought he was just going to walk in and be president. He was vice president for 8 years. For him not to be president was a slap in his face, a slap in Eisenhower's face. The 50s were the greatest time. It was a great decade. So he's probably, he was still shocked that he was never president until 1968. But then Watergate, I think Nixon was worried about what the Democrats might have on him. I don't know. Somebody might have, because he was a shoo-in for the 72 election against McGovern. So why in the world did he have to break into Watergate unless he wanted to get rid of something that was incriminating? I don't know. I've never heard anybody mention it. I brought it up to a couple of people. When I was down there at the conference, one of the things, as the conference went along, I was like, that's something I should do. I should go around asking these speakers. I only ended up asking one speaker, or two, maybe three, if they thought Watergate was related to the JFK assassination. I asked a few people who were there, but everybody I met, everybody I talked to, and maybe I've talked to 10 people about this. I should have tried to talk to more, but I had a lot of other duties I was involved with. But maybe next year I'll do an informal. There were like 60 speakers. I'm going to sign off now, but everybody there that I saw, that I talked to, believe Watergate is related to the JFK assassination. I think it's in Haldeman's book, which I discovered, I think, To the Ends of Power, something like that, where he quotes Nixon as saying, referring to the JFK assassination as the Bay of Pigs. That was the, interchange metaphor, polite way to talk about the JFK assassination without talking about the JFK assassination. So that raised a few eyebrows. So, and then there's so many other ideas out there, but most of them are, there's a lot of theories out there. There's a lot of testimonies out there. It comes down to whose report do you believe. So that's where, I think we all have to. We'll never know, probably a lot of it, but I think we can draw some sound conclusions, and we can see that Lee truly was. And then they said, man, he was a spy. He was CIA. Nobody's saying he was perfect, whatever. I don't think he ever killed anybody. He couldn't shoot for the life of him. He couldn't hit the, right side of a barn. He wasn't a sniper. And from reading Me and Lee, you learn a lot about Lee. He was very smart. He was highly intelligent. He was well read, and that rings true. And Judy's one of the smartest women who ever lived, and highest IQ in the state of Florida. Work she did, cancer research projects, brought her to New Orleans. She was a superstar in high school, recognized by the governor and the senator, and Oshner recognized her as well eventually, and so her life brought her to New Orleans. She was there. She thought she was going to be trying to cure cancer because her grandmother had passed away, so she was drafted into this thing, and they needed her because she could digest volumes of journals, plus her experiments created cancer in mice quicker than anyone. But they wanted a bioweapon to go after Castro. And they figured if they get rid of Castro, that would keep the, anti-Castro people, that would appease them. And they wouldn't go after Kennedy. It turns out Lee actually saved Kennedy's life. And you read about that in Me and Lee. I'll get the book right here. Me and Lee by Judy Baker. That's Judy actually right there. And he saved his life in Chicago. And there's a great testimony there. His Dr. Mary's Monkey by Ed Haslem. That's a book that talks about RFK, and among many things, but one of the things that talks about it, RFK and Lee Harvey Oswald possibly Lee working for RFK and made a deal with him to come back. But that book is phenomenal. It's one of the greatest books I've ever read, right up there with Me and Lee. That book talks about the polio problem because they gave cancer to all these people. And it talks about Dr. Mary, how she was involved with the cancer research, and they were trying to create a vaccine that would, because they had already given cancer to hundreds of millions of people, and then they were trying to desperately use this linear particle accelerator, huge device, 3-story building. There was only like 10 of them in the world or something, and they had one in New Orleans, and they were desperately trying to create a way to cure cancer through it. Whether they did or not, you don't know, but one of the hypotheses in the book is that HIV possibly could have been a strain of this virus that they used to create the vaccines, and then it got into the wrong hands of the people who in turn wanted to go and wipe out, populations that were, too promiscuous for their own good, and possibly targeting Cuba or Haiti, and that's where AIDS actually started. I mean, that's why you should get the book, Dr. Mary's Monkeys, and Dr. Mary's Monkey, and by Ed Haslem. And Mary ends up dying, so the book's all about a murder. Now Ed, his whole life is basically in New Orleans, and it's around this whole subject. Even though he became an amazing executive, he kept coming back to this story. So this story is 50 years in the making. Looking for that other book I had. You don't see it. One more look. Yeah, let's see. I wanted to show you Lincoln. I know I had it, but Lincoln and John. I'm sorry, Kennedy and Johnson by Evelyn Lincoln. That's the other book that got me going. Alright, so I'm going to sign off. That's it. A little long today. But those are the elephants in the room. Both, Oswald's innocent and Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. And yes, I'm a conspiracy theorist, if you will, but I think it's more than a theory, more than a hypothesis. It's becoming a proven fact and objectively verifiable by eyewitness testimony and common sense. So that's it for today. Have a great day. We'll catch you later. Thanks for visiting.